Welcome back to another episode of Starting Out, a podcast where we share our stories of starting out in this great big world. We talk about our highlights, trials and tribulations, and lessons we've learned along the way. So, as you are starting your journey, we hope you can learn from us. So, Cor, what's the topic for today?
The topic for today is a reflection of some little jobs that we had and what the ultimate bigger picture was. We'll be going over some good old memories of our first job. And obviously, as a first job, it might not be the most luxurious or the most amazing job you'd imagine. We talk a little bit about what it was, but then ultimately, what are some things that we learned and some things that we took away from it.
I think this is a good topic to have because I think a lot of us are just starting out in our careers, or we're in university, or we just graduated from university. And I think it's really beneficial to have a set of stories to tell you of basically insignificant or small jobs, or, these side hustles, or these volunteer positions. Kind of laid the foundation of what was going to come, or what was really important later on.
Yeah.
In the moment we didn't see it. We'll tell you why it was the biggest struggle in the world. But I think it's good to basically tie some strings together to be okay, these are how things that are connecting. And this is how it was helping us now in our current roles, or it helped be the stepping stone. Let's talk about a funny situation that we were in that kind of ignited us to be I think it's time for us to actually get started in our careers. So I'll paint the picture. Basically, we were in first year and we did summer school. So everybody got an internship, not even a real internship. People went back to their jobs and stuff. We're okay, let's do our internship. Cor, what happened?
We didn't get internships.
No, we did not.
Yeah, which is why we ended up doing summer school instead, to fast track a little bit of our courses. It was such a down in the rocks, rock bottom moment for the both of us, because we were both filling out our tuition forms for OSAP, I believe, for the summer school, a student loan. And you basically had to input a lot of the numbers that were on your T4 form. So whether it's what is your income for the year? What is your parents' income for the year? Basically, our form essentially was zero because we didn't make any money at that point. So like Neeqs said, if the CRA wants to come knocking on our door to get money, we have none. Sure, you could take a look, but there's nothing to take from. So I think that was the rock bottom for us in terms of we want to start making money, first of all, after first year, after we take summer school. But second of all, I think that was the turning point where we started thinking more about our resume, about jobs, about volunteering, and being more serious with our search. But essentially, I hope that none of you have to experience it, the gut-wrenching moment of seeing a form and be yeah, I make nothing, I'm sorry.
Exactly. I think it's almost a turning point of being I think both of us just looked at each other, we're yeah, we can't do this anymore. Next year, we're gonna put something down. Even if it's $1, we're gonna put something down on this line, because we can't be in a position anymore of woe is me, I don't have any money. It's no. We're gonna figure it out.
You need experience to get experience. That saying, I think, is so true, because even when you're looking to even just get a job to be a busboy or a bus girl, a stalker at a grocery store, right? To get those jobs, you still need to go to the interview and you still need to talk about some skills that you've developed. I totally understand, and we totally understand that it's hard because you don't have experience, but then they're well, we need experience to get your first internship. To get my first internship, it's it is an entry role. How am I supposed to have all these skills already?
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, because you're well, I don't have this, but you need this. So now we're gonna basically tell you of how we did it, and don't get discouraged for our first two stories, because trust me, we will have other stories of being this is actually how you start building. Yeah, Cor, why don't you start us off?
So my initial job in first year, so after I did the summer school, I ended up going back to Toronto. And obviously, because at that time, the internships are 4 months long. So because of that, I didn't get an internship. So even though I was applying so much and everything, I looked everywhere, I handed in my resume here and there. But ultimately, I ended up working for my parents for the last 2 months of summer. I think initially what I didn't really like about that is, number one, I felt that I was almost settling for a job, and it almost felt like the last option for me, just because a lot of my friends that I met in first year, a lot of my classmates, they ultimately got like internships at banks like CIBC or TD, like those actual like business jobs, quote unquote. But unfortunately, I didn't get that, and I almost thought that I wasn't good enough. And I'm like, oh gosh, if first year they're already starting to work at banks, then I'm like a year behind. Like I don't have 4 months of experience with me. But then second of all, I also felt that because working for my parents, I thought they were going to baby me a little bit. And I thought they were just going to be like, okay, you're just going to do like the labor work and that's it. Like it almost felt like they wouldn't trust me and to handle more tasks and more responsibilities. So that's ultimately how I felt starting the internship. But I think moving on as the days went on and even by the end of the summer, ultimately what I learned from that experience is that you may not like where you're working, like how I wasn't really interested in some of the things that I was doing at first, but then I really tried to keep an open mind and I really tried to learn new things and learn new skills on the job. So I remember when I first started off, I was just packaging orders and everything, which is fine because like it's still a skill that I needed to learn how to do. But ultimately, I started looking at different ways of how I could bring value from whatever I learned in first year, whether it's in courses, whether it's in volunteering or whatever other skills that I had. And so ultimately, I actually created a newsletter, just basically just saying like, oh, these are some of the new products that we had. And it was very basic, but it was still a good way to keep our customers informed and updated as to what we were doing. And my parents didn't ask me to do that. It was something that like I brought forward to be like, hey, you know what? I learned MailChimp in first year. I could send out an email to everyone. Like, although I didn't like the initial things I was doing, I still kept an open mind and was still like, okay, maybe there's something more of value that I could add. And ultimately, it's like a little bit of a resume booster. Even though, like I said, my classmates and other first year individuals had like the opportunity to get jobs at the big banks, get jobs at accounting firms, I still learned a lot of good skills that were ultimately transferable to whatever I was going to do next. So I think those were the two bigger pictures that I took away. It definitely did suck when I first started. In the end, it was almost like putting my foot through the door and be like, hey, you know what, guys? Like, I want to work at a bank. Like, that's what I thought in first year. Like, if I want to work at a bank, you all need to start somewhere. I needed to start somewhere. I know I'm very fortunate enough to have had parents who had a business that I could be a part of.
I think I like this story because you took something rather than nothing. I think there's a lot of pride sometimes with starting out in your first career. Be like, I cannot imagine me serving Starbucks orders or working at XYZ, or like, God forbid, now I'm like working for my parents' business. But I think it kind of plays into the whole idea of like, it is what it is. You have to work there. Like, there's no other choice. You can't figure out something in the next like 2 seconds to get a job somewhere else. You probably don't know that many people to be like, oh, I can try somebody else's business, because that takes time to foster relationships and all that. I think the hard part is like, okay, you got the job, but then the great thing is like looking for opportunities within the job. And if you can't find like a blatant, your parents being like, hey, Cor, I need to boost my revenue, and do you have any ideas? And our idea is to create a newsletter. They didn't do that to you. So like the fact that you're thinking of things and trying to be proactive, I think is a great skill. I think no matter where you go in life, you could be the fucking CEO. You're always trying to be like, what can I do? What are some like low-hanging fruit over here? I think what I notice a lot in people's resumes is like, yes, you have your mundane things, but like, I remember they're called like stretch projects at Microsoft. What is something you're doing just a little bit out of your comfort zone so that you can like basically stretch your skills a little bit? And I feel like your newsletter is definitely a stretch project because you were hired to pack boxes, but in the end, you're like, no, I have something else in mind, and it definitely can help the business out. So good on you for doing that.
How about you? What is your first work experience and what did you learn from it?
Yeah. Okay, so like I also had parents that had their own business, but I was like, okay, I'm ready to break away from that and actually try something new, because I need to put something new on my resume and I need to like have new sets of skills. You can't be like, I worked here for 7 years. This is a more of like an interesting point of my life, because I was in second year and I was like, okay, I applied to a tech company called Cisco and I actually didn't get the job. Spoiler alert. For the first half of the summer, I was like, guys, I'm gonna be working in Toronto. I'm gonna have a little badge. So I didn't get the job. I'll tell you a little bit more about what I really learned, but I'll tell you what I learned from the job that I did get that summer. I worked at Lowe's as a customer representative on the shop floor at the freaking garden center. Love that company, but it's more so like the one that was like a hack Lowe's. It wasn't even the real like corporate America shopping mall. Like it probably is like an acre of size. No. This garden center was in the freaking parking lot, detached from the actual Lowe's itself. Super ghetto. Didn't have all the amenities. Was kind of sketchy in so many different ways. I didn't realize this at the time, but it was one of the best experiences of like two things. I like basically learned how to like build customer relationships, faking it till you make it. Bro, the amount of times I was a landscaper for someone, you know, your hostas will look great over here. I'm like, and you know what? The fact that I could read a freaking label made me like an expert because they need 6 inches apart. They're like, oh my God, wow, like really? And then I was like, oh, what's your color scheme? Like, what's your patio furniture? Like, why would you get yellow? Because it clashes with whatever. And I found that like I was able to like sell things very easily and like get people up to like $100-$200 carts very easily because I was just talking them. And I thought it was really cool because I would have been very good at it. And that was not expected of me because I think with these jobs, like especially when you're flipping burgers or if you're on a retail floor selling t-shirt.
Yeah, because you're getting paid minimum, right? So it's like because of that, I'm just gonna do the absolute minimum, right? Like at that point, it's like I just want to make money.
Minimum job for minimum work.
Yeah,
I didn't realize I was working on those skills so much. And then I still get made fun of this till this day, but me being me, obviously that ghetto garden center was like so poorly run. The manager was never there. Like no one ever checked up on me, which is great, but at the same time it was like so horrible. And I could point out everything that went wrong. They're like, why are we losing money here? And I was like, because of this, and this. And I don't know what happened to me that day, but I got so angry that I wrote basically a 20-page essay, like a 20-page dissertation of why everything went wrong and all my recommendations for it.
She basically did an MBA. Like you analyzed the company inside and out.
That's literally what I did. At first I was like, okay, this is just the way I am. Like I really like to bring forth ideas. Like, okay, these are things that are wrong, but here are my suggestions also of what you can do. And I just realized I was really proactive as a person. I was like, oh, maybe I do have like a business acumen of being like, if that doesn't work, how can I help? And in the moment, I didn't think it was anything. I didn't even think of it as an MBA, but that is so true. I just literally went straight to our manager and was like, this is my stuff. And then they were like going over my suggestions and everything. Big picture is you never know what you're going to get yourself into. I think you got this really low job, like you might be doing certain things, but you never know who you're going to meet, what that person's going to do later on in life. So build good relationships, try to build some new skills. You were like, let's do a newsletter. I was like, hey, let's learn how to do sales, even though you're not commissioned to do anything. But it's like, if it's so low stakes and they don't buy anything, not on my head, but if they were to buy something, at least I know I did something right.
I find it interesting that even though like the low paying job, you were still able to not really just do the minimum amount of work because you're like, well, this is really boring. First of all, I'm not learning anything. Second of all, like, okay, cool, my manager doesn't really check on me, but there's a lot of stuff that is wrong with this, and I have a lot of ideas that could help fix this and make this a lot better and more efficient for the future. I think your proactiveness really showed there. My manager may not be here on the floor right now, but I have so many ideas. Here, let me write a paper. And then not only did you say like, okay, this is what's wrong, which is like great because you were able to pinpoint like some of the things that were wrong. These were the things that were wrong, but this is how I recommend you to fix these things. I don't think that's seen in a job description. When you see job description like at Lowe's, it's like you put out flowers, like you display this for the garden center. It's really hard to teach someone to be like, no, like on top of that, like I want you to bring these skills, which you definitely brought, which is like unexpected in a way because first of all, like you're not commissioned for sales. So no matter how much more you try to sell or like how much more you try to like be proactive, like you're not going to be paid more for what it is. But it's still good that like you'll learn that skill on the job where you're like, you know what? I have really good ideas. And I feel like maybe that was when like your creativity first started. It seems like where you're like, I have a lot of ideas. And I could even see that now where it's like very evident that you're very creative. You're really like, oh, let me try this.
Yeah, I think one of the bigger things is like maybe the way I'm like slightly wired or like I've trained myself to think is like, oh, that doesn't work. Okay, let me try something else. Always being like, oh, I wonder if we tried it this way, like, would that work?
Yeah, which is, it's really funny that like one of our previous episodes was about you being in accounting. And I'm just imagining you like, oh, this doesn't work. Let me put that number in instead and that'll be fine.
Miscellaneous. It always balances now. Yeah. See, you see how that's like not great in certain fields, but in other fields, it's like problem solving and thinking out of the box definitely helps a lot. Okay. On this podcast, we know that things are hard. Let's check our privilege real quick. I had experience beforehand because I can fully admit that using my parents' business in the past and using my experiences working with them definitely helped me land a job at Lowe's. How about you?
Yeah, I think in first year, I know a lot of people like are privileged enough and like are fortunate enough. Like we totally understand it's not easy to be like, hey dad, I'm gonna come work for your company this summer. But on the other hand, I basically had a volunteer experience. This was in second year, so this was part of our, basically like a conference for first year students that we had to plan, we had to do everything, and then we had to bring all the speakers in and everything for a one-day event. Essentially, when I went to the interview, they took a chance on me, really, because I really didn't have a lot of work experience. You need work experience to get work experience. Well, I don't have work experience. What do you want me to do? In that case, that's when you start talking about your other skills that you've learned, because you might not have worked at a actual job or like at a business job, like at a bank or whatever it is. I am 100% sure you still have so many skills to talk about. So for example, in the interview, I basically took some things that I learned in first year to really butter up the skills that I've learned. So for example, in first year commerce, we had a lot of group presentations. We had a lot of group projects that we had to write essays. So what did you learn? Oh, well, and I learned verbal communication. I learned written communication. I also learned like how to work in a group efficiently. I think also you could draw on a lot of experiences from high school as well. So for example, if you volunteered in high school, I think almost every high school in Ontario, you had to do 40 hours of volunteering experiences. I don't know if you did that as well.
Yeah, I think it's like a set standard or some type of volunteering experience.
Yeah, so there you go. You have 40 hours or more even of volunteer experiences of skills that you might have learned to talk about. It was also a little bit of a vibe check as well, where during the interview, it's like not only are they looking for some skills that like is on their job description, but also to see if you might be a good fit with the other team. When they interviewed me, I'm pretty sure they knew I didn't have a lot of job experiences because it's very evident on my resume. What else can you learn from a person? Oh, well, let's go talk to her. Let's see, like, you know, if she's chill, if she's like type A, type B. So I think those are some of the things that I definitely learned and experienced in that volunteer experience. And like I said, if you don't have an actual job experience when you're starting out, which I'm sure many high school and even first year students are feeling, don't worry. That's not the only experience you can talk about in an interview or you could put on your resume. There's so many more things that you could bring to the table and add value to.
Yeah, I think it's almost you're digging for these small little glimmers of hope of being like, okay, it looks like I didn't do anything here, but I'm going to turn it into something like tangible, packaged, and all that. And this exercise itself is a very hard one to do, I find, because you're trying to make something out of nothing. And you're trying to also find things in places that people normally don't find. So like you're saying, okay, I went to first year classes and because I did a group project, everyone had to do it. It's not like you're the only person that ever did a group project. I think it's your ability to package it and be like, these are like some skills that I learned from it. And this is how I'm going to apply it to this role over here is a really important thing. Mold a past thing to like fit that. Sometimes it actually helps.
I think I also used my university experiences during my job interview of my first actual job interview out of university. In first year, I used some high school experiences, but then moving on in post grad, I used some university experiences, whether it's like my internship, whether it's actual, like we talked about, class skills that you learned. But I think it's almost like a funny because it's like a continuous cycle of like you drawing on your past experiences, even though like you might think, oh my God, I didn't even do anything. Literally just sit down and write all the little tasks that you did. And it's like, oh, I wrote an essay. Oh, what skill is that? Oh, that's written communication skills. That's like project management because I had to plan out all of my time of when to finish the essay. Literally so funny because it's like a perpetual cycle of like, let me draw on what I did a year ago to talk about in this interview.
Exactly. Life is one big, like a domino effect. One thing builds on the other and then builds on the other. And then I think the last thing I wanted to say was like, vibe checking is so important. Okay, say if like you got nothing, right? Like, okay, like you are pulling your hair out and you're like, this is all great, but you guys all had stuff to do. What about your personality? What is the energy that you bring to the table? Are you down in the dumps? Are you so defeated already when you get in there? They didn't even defeat you, you defeated yourself. And I feel like sometimes people do get hired because of that. It's like, you gave me a really great feeling at the end of the day.
Tell me about your experience with Cisco.
Oh, my heart and soul where it broke.
First heartbreak experience.
I was so sad that I got rejected. And then I think I was like, oh my God, I can't find another job in time. All the internships are taken. Summer starts in like a week. So I bring this back up again because I want to go over what went wrong. I didn't ask for help. That was my biggest mess up ever, was I did not ask for help. I think there's like a catch-22 with these things where it's like, you don't know anything, so you don't know how to ask for help. And then when you get help, I always feel like I'm bothering someone. They said they were helping me, but then I'm like, oh, I don't know if you're gonna really help me. And I just made sure to do it on my own. And I feel like that really messed up my second interview. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to dodge a question properly. And I bring that up because I think when you're starting out, you don't know anything. So you might as well ask a friend or ask your career mentors. If you went to school, pretty much paying for it. Right? There's a resource center.
Yeah.
Grill those people. Use it because you're like, hey, I freaking paid for it. I think the biggest thing I learned from that was like, and again, it carries on with me forever, is before I even go to an interview for a job or anything, I always check LinkedIn if I know somebody who works there. It's hard when I first started out because I don't know anybody that works in every single place. I always do a mock interview with a friend. Yeah, I've had many great experiences come out of that because I was able to get a lot more in life. And I think it's because of this experience, as painful as it was, I thought I was going to have the freaking latest summer ever. Like a Wall Street bro, with my freaking badge, taking the storm of Toronto. But I didn't. I effed up, but it made me more smart in the future.
I definitely understand the feeling of getting caught up in, I'm working in downtown Toronto.
I'm a big city gal. Move out of the way.
Yeah, because it was so hyped, especially in first year where, like I talked about, our classmates got a job in the Big Four or a job at a big bank even in downtown Toronto. And like you see their Snapchats or Instagram stories of the high rises and the sunrise and everything, and them on the GO train and commuting and everything.
Yeah.
And then ultimately like hyping yourself up for that lifestyle for that summer and essentially getting rejected. It's so sad, yes. And I do remember how upset you were with yourself. And I remember because like that interview process was also very long. I think it was a couple weeks, right? Because it took a while for you to go in, do the interview, and then hear back, and then go for round 2 again, and that cycle.
Just keep going, yeah.
I think one thing that I hear from your experience with that is just, even though at that moment you felt like this is it, this is the job that I was supposed to have. And it's like, once I get this job, like there's going to be so many better jobs down the road with this one job under my belt. But you didn't get that and you were upset. But I think the bigger picture for that one, in terms of how I see this story too, you allowed yourself to be like, okay, I'm upset. But you didn't hold on to it for really long. I think for a lot of our listeners who are starting starting out in college and university, it's kind of difficult, and we totally understand that you might have like a dream job. Like you might want your first internship to be at Google, which is like amazing. We're here for it. You know, you do you.
Yes.
We're gonna root for you. But even in our previous episodes, like if you don't get it, it's okay. You don't have to beat yourself up for it. If you don't get it, well, look back and reflect. What went wrong? Are you gonna ask for help the second time? Are you gonna do mock interviews with your friends? Are you gonna come together with your classmates and look at your resumes? So I'm really happy that like it was obviously very upsetting for you at first, but you ultimately dug yourself out of that. And it almost seems like that experience was like along the horizons, like way back, unheard of now, and we don't bring it up.
We bury the hatchet. We'll put the final nail in. Yeah, I think no one talks about stuff like this when they first start out. Like no one, when they come back from summer school, it's like, and guess what I got rejected from? Like no one really talks about that. So we're telling you that like as much as, you know, if you looked at our resumes and it's like, wow, it looks so freaking shiny. It's like, no, there's some painful moments in there that did not get in there.
I agree. I hope that you were able to see almost like the transition from first year where we worked a job that we didn't necessarily like and we didn't enjoy, but we still learned a lot of transferable skills from and life lessons from onto like a more feasible thing that you could do, such as volunteering. So because of that, I think for me, my ultimate big statement, when you're starting out, you may not necessarily have work experience to leverage, but you 100% have skills that you've developed, whether it's in high school, your 40 hours of community service, volunteering in first year, and especially in classes as well. Just remember, you're paying for your education.
Yeah.
So I 100% guarantee you that you've learned a lot of skills in first year. Just make sure to reflect on it. I 100% guarantee you will find experiences to talk about on your resume as well as a job interview.
Yeah, you know what? It's the power of making nothing into something. You will feel very empowered to be like, you know what? I can string up these 10 things together to be something very applicable, and you can actually do a lot with what you have. Probably experience something that you're like, okay, I can definitely talk about this.
Yeah. Or even like traveling. If you took a year off, like after high school, and you like backpacked, independence, logistic planning, everything. I feel like organization, time management, so many skills you could draw from.
So many things. Yeah, I feel like my one thing I wish I knew was like, it's more like comfort of letting you know and letting my old self know that it's like everything feels very scattered. Everything that you've done feels very irrelevant. Most of the time you feel like you're on your own because you're like, no one knows me. I haven't had 50 years to build my networks. So I think with that being said, asking for help is going to be your biggest skill set you can ever have. And then knowing what questions to ask, asking good questions, where to find help. Google is like one of your best things that is ever
friends.
Like literally best friends. We have a joke in our friend group. If you're not Googling your job and how to do your job at least once a day, you're not doing it right.
Yeah.
So ask for help always. Help is always around the corner. If you get help, you can always offer help. And that's a very important skill to have too.
I like how you said that when you start off, you're going to have random jobs and you might not see how like they connect to one another. And you might have jobs that aren't necessarily in your field yet. But I'm sure when you do a little bit of brainstorming, you're going to make that nothing seem like something. And I think you're going to be surprised with how much of those skills are actually transferable. It may not be like the physical skill that you've learned at that job, but it's more so like the intangible things that like no one can really teach you, but you kind of figure it out and you're like, okay, I think I know how this is done now.
Yeah. So as you are getting your first job or first volunteering experience, first leadership thing at your school or whatever, we hope that this was able to like basically uncover a little bit, because people are always like, oh, this is how you get your first job, you know, go to school.
Yeah, you hand out your resumes.
And you're like, what on earth are you supposed to put on there? It's like, I have nothing. Hopefully this gives you a couple of ideas. Obviously, this is not like a framework at all, but it's more so like, this is our experiences and there's some stuff you can do in your own life. And if obviously we missed a whole bunch of things, I think I'm more curious if you would like to share with us basically how either you turned nothing into something or you ended up taking on a job. You didn't know how that job was going to pan out, but it leads you to another job because you either met someone there or you did something and then apparently that boss loves it or whatever. Let us know, because I feel like those are really, really important stories, because I think too often in times, like, people are always like, I did a 5-step process, went to school, got the job, became a lawyer, and had fun, and retired, and then made money along the whole way. It shouldn't be like that. There's a little bit of like mysteriousness happening. We would love to know, as usual. So we will see you in the next episode. You have just been listening to the Starting Out podcast. If you liked today's episode, please make sure to rate and like the show. Also, leave us a review. It helps us a lot. To never miss an episode, please subscribe and turn on notifications. We love to hear from you. So if you want to chat with us, tweet us at startingoutpod. Links are in the description. As always, we are so excited for you to start out on your journey, all while listening to ours. See you in the next one.